Since my wife introduced me to your channel, I have been hooked. I'm a truck driver, and your stories have kept me company through the long nights and have helped me stay focused on the road. As a skeptic, I've always been hesitant to believe in things like ghosts, aliens, and other paranormal phenomena. But one experience I had on the road in West Virginia many years ago completely changed my perspective. It was then that I became a full-blown believer. I was driving through rural Pennsylvania, probably around 2 in the morning. The road was quiet, and there wasn't much traffic. I was just trying to focus on the road and stay awake. All in all, it was a routine night of drinking coffee, listening to tunes, YouTube, and driving. I'm a long-haul truck driver, and I'd been driving for 3 days straight. I was exhausted, but I had a deadline and had to keep driving through. I was carrying a shipment of goods to a small town on the other side of the state and was already behind schedule. It's just part of the job, but it's not an easy gig. As was driving down the road, I noticed something moving in the distance. At first, I thought it was a bear, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. It was a huge beast, standing on 2 legs and covered in fur. It was unbelievably tall and was staring right at me. It had long, matted fur, sharp teeth, and glowing yellow eyes. It had muscles bulging under its fur. I slowed down my truck to take a closer look. The creature doesn't seem scared of me at all, and it just stands there staring. It freaked me out, and I just kept staring at it. It was beyond anything I thought I would ever see in my entire life. As I started to then lay off the brakes and continue on, the creature started to follow me. It was running alongside my truck and keeping up with me easily. I tried to speed up, but it just kept pace with me. It was intense, and it clearly didn't like me or my truck very much. This thing was focused on me and wasn't stopping. To be honest, I was a grown man feeling helpless. I wasn't sure how I was going to get out of this situation and didn't know who to turn to for help. Then the creature started to get more aggressive, and it started to bang on the side of my truck. I could see its eyes glowing in the dark, and it was clear that it was not going to let me go without a fight. I was starting to panic, and was starting to think about my family back home. I really didn't want to die out here alone and scared. The creature started to scratch at my truck's windows, trying to break through. I could hear its claws scraping against the glass, and I knew that I was in danger. I tried to steer the truck away and increase my speed, but it just kept coming. The beast was relentless. After what felt like an eternity of driving and evading the creature, I finally found a way to lose it. I quickly pulled out my cell phone and dialed 911. The call went through, and I explained what happened to the dispatcher. She sounded just as confused as I did when I was telling her what happened, but she told me to sit tight and that help was on the way. What was bizarre was that the police never showed up. Well, at least not police in uniform. A cop car arrived, but out of it came these men in suits who ordered me out of the truck and took down my report. They took pictures of the damage to my truck and told me there were similar reports of encounters with a creature in the area. I was freaked out. They told me that it's unusual for one to become aggressive like this, and they're not sure what caused it. They also warned me that it would be in my best interest not to disclose anything about what I saw to anyone, and pretty much forced me to sign a form saying the same. When they left, I was relieved that the ordeal was over, but as they drove away, my mind started racing on what was being covered up and how much control these people have over the information we receive. With the creature and suited men gone, I was finally able to continue my journey. I'm still shaken up by the encounter, but I know that I need to keep going. I made my delivery and headed to a motel to pass out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange is going on. As I drove away from the area, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the world is hiding. There are so many things we don't know, so many mysteries waiting to be uncovered. I'm not sure if I ever want to encounter another creature like that again, but part of me is also intrigued by the unknown. In the days and weeks that follow, I try to put the experience behind me. But I can't shake the feeling that there's more to the story than what I've been told. I do some research and try to uncover more information about the creature, but all I find are rumors and speculation. Looking back on the encounter, I realize how lucky I was to have survived. I also feel like I've been let in on a secret, like I've seen something that most people never will. But even all these years later, I'm worried about who will come after me for spilling the beans. As I think about the encounter, I realize that there's so much we don't know about the world. There are creatures out there that are barely seen, and secrets the government keeps from us. It's a scary thought, and I can't help but wonder what else is waiting to be discovered. Most people don't think of the hills when they think of Texas. I don't know why that is. When I think of Texas, the first thing I think of is the hills. Maybe that's because I grew up there. Until I was about 20 years old, the hills were all I knew. My family tended a goat ranch for a few generations. We'd still be there, I think, if it wasn't for what happened to me. If it wasn't for what I saw, it was my last summer there. I was 20, and for the first time in my life, my father wasn't working alongside me. So his responsibilities fell to me. Soon I was feeding, cleaning, and herding all of the livestock myself. I forgot something very important. My father had rules for the ranch. Goats had to be in certain places by certain times, and those rules were even more strict during the summer. Whenever I asked why, he explained it away as lessons he had inherited from his grandfather. I guess those rules didn't stick with me so good. The summer got hot, and I got tired. I got a little lax with my duties. Before I knew it, some of the goats had split from the ranch. They'd run into those hills looking for God knows what. It's hard to read a goat's mind, you know. It came down to me, of course, to chase them. I tracked most of them down pretty quickly, too. But one was a little more hard-headed than the rest. I didn't get my sights on him until the sun was going down. I didn't know it at the time, but I was already too late. Something got to the goat before me. It was just a blur at first. It was a gray streak against the rolling browns and yellows. The blur passed by me, and before I knew what was happening, my goat was gone. I didn't know what I was seeing, so I kept approaching the area where I saw that mysterious shape collide with my animal. There were tracks in the dirt. There were signs of a struggle, but not a lot, so it was obvious that the struggle ended quickly. And then there were drag marks leading away from the site. How could it have snatched the goat off its feet and dragged it away without me seeing, without even slowing down? It didn't make any sense. In my mind, the thought of something moving that fast, colliding with an animal, I would have expected a bit of carnage, you know? There wasn't a drop of blood on the ground. I continued looking around only to hear a strange clicking in the distance. Something was chattering its teeth. I looked in that direction, but with the light fading, I couldn't make it out. It was too far away. I could only tell that it was watching me. It was warning me somehow. Maybe it was telling me that the game was about to begin. I knew I needed to get back. I needed to get out of those hills before I disappeared too. Whatever I was dealing with, I was confident that it could carry me away as cleanly as it had my goat. I'd been on an ATV. I had left it a while back so I wouldn't scare the goat as I closed in, but it was still nearby. I just had to get to it. Unfortunately for me, the thing knew exactly where I was headed. Just when I turned to run, the blur came back. It streaked out in front of me and skidded to a sudden halt. It moved faster than any animal I'd seen. What was glaring at me was something almost indescribable. It was gray-skinned and almost scaly, but in the shape of a large dog. Its tail looked barbed. Its eyes were wide and bulging, almost like a toad's. I didn't want to find out if it could jump like one too. Fortunately for me, one of the rules of the ranch that I did follow was to remain armed at all times. I'd never seen a creature like the one in front of me, but I had seen my share of wily predators. I held my breath and fired a bullet into the air, hoping it would be enough to scare the monster away. I got lucky because it was. I saw those bulging eyes go wide, staring at the gun as if it recognized the weapon. Then it dashed away. Maybe to escape, maybe to regroup. I didn't stick around to find out. I sprinted for my own getaway. I started that ATV and tore out of there. I was embarrassed at first, but eventually I did tell my father. How else would I explain that we'd lost one of our own? He seemed relieved. I guess he was more thankful that I had gotten away than he was upset about my laziness. I expected him to chew me out. Instead, he agreed when I suggested that it might be time for me to move on from the ranch. Truth was, I didn't want to go back out there. If he had known about that creature all this time and still wanted to tend to our animals, that was his decision. But it wasn't mine. So I headed off to the city to work. But now, recently, my father passed away. All I can think about are those hills. Part of them are mine too, I suppose. The land we worked on, the animals we tended to, and the house that I grew up in. They all fall to me now. I don't want to say goodbye to that place, not permanently. But how do I go back there and feel safe after seeing what I did? Is it just a matter of obeying those old rules he taught me, or would it be wiser for me to stay far away from my old home? What do you think? I never fully believed in all this stuff. To me, it was just fun to listen to and think about, but that was about it. However, I had a particularly bizarre experience this past week, and I've been kind of stuck on what I now believe in. Basically, I'm at a loss as to what's really the truth. I'm writing this from a bed and breakfast in western Massachusetts. My husband and I came here on vacation to see the local art museums and visit with this family. My husband grew up in the suburbs of Boston, but his family went on vacation in the Berkshires. We were both feeling burnt out from city life and considering buying a house with some land. But the main purpose of this visit was to de-stress and get the lay of the land. We arrived at the bed and breakfast late in the evening. We had booked the small cabin behind the main house. It was a charming, cozy spot that had everything we needed. Just walking in, I could take deeper breaths. I was so thrilled that I would get to relax a bit. It would be a good time to think about our next steps. That night when my husband was in the shower, I was lying in bed looking at Zillow properties that would be in our pay grade. It was raining steadily, and we had spent the evening watching old movies. I lost track of Zillow and the shower noises and the rain outside and found myself staring into space. One of those moments where you think about everything and nothing. Fully present and yet 150 feet above your body. And this is when I heard the tapping noises. It sounded like something was tapping on the window. I looked to the window to see if that was the case, but did not see anything. The rain was still falling, but it had faded to the background. Renewed interest in my surroundings, I began wandering around the cabin looking to all the windows. There had to be some source of this strange tapping that had suddenly started. At first, I could not see anything that would illuminate the source of the noise. Perhaps I was imagining things, something bouncing around in my subconscious. But then I saw it. This is a prank. That was my first thought. But in the bottom corner window pane, I saw a tiny little hand tapping the glass of the front window by the porch. I must have jumped a foot. I sat down on the couch, scooting myself as far as I could towards the opposite wall. I could do nothing else but stare at this window. The finger was stubby and short, the hand it belonged to shriveled like the root of a tree. It tapped in a simple rhythm in threes. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. This went on for another 30 seconds. It felt like an eternity. The tapping eventually ceased. The hand disappeared with a gentle slide along the window. I took some deep breaths and did a little inventory of what I could have possibly seen. Mustering up some courage, I decided to step out onto the porch and see what I could find. Nothing seemed out of place. My husband came out of the shower and saw that I was tense and now back sitting on the bed. He asked if I was all right, and I told him I was fine. I was very reluctant to share what I had just seen because I did not fully believe it myself. We went to bed, and needless to say, I had a difficult time falling asleep, so I ended up rolling around and looking at my phone. I eventually rolled onto my shoulder and looked out the window once again. To my shock, that same lower corner window pane now had a pair of bright yellow eyes staring in through it. They were human in appearance and were staring directly towards us. I sat straight up, shocked at what I was seeing. In a longer look, I realized that the eyes were a part of a wrinkled little face. Instead of hair on top of its head was several short spikes. Summoning some bravery, I got out of bed and walked towards the front door of the cabin. The thing in the window seemed to nod and smile when I did this. I don't know what prompted me to get up, put my jacket on, and walk outside. But once I did so, I looked around and it was gone. Just some rustling noises in the woods beyond. I walked towards the noise and the woods in the dark, looking around for this little creature. Eventually I saw those same eyes in the distance, up in a tree, so I ended up hiking up to the top of the hill where they were. Once I was close to the tree, I stopped and looked up at the creature. I then took a few steps forward, hoping to get a little closer and see it better. My gaze was up towards the tree, locked in a stare with the creature that I didn't notice I was walking towards a cliff face. Because of the trance it had me in, I nearly fell to what would have been a serious injury. I looked back at the yellow eyes in the tree. They blinked. Then the creature crawled up the tree and disappeared. This is when I seemed to come back to my senses, and I hightailed it back to the cabin and jumped back in bed. I have no idea how my husband didn't wake during all of this, which is almost what scared me the most. Did the creature have him in some kind of trance too? I then looked at the clock and only 10 minutes had passed. Did this even really happen? I decided to relay it all to my husband as if it had been a dream, and I decided to just go with that in my own head too. Since then, the trip has been completely normal. At least up to right now, as I'm writing this to you. No sightings of the little creature. I have been a little nervous traveling around the Berkshires, trying to keep my wits about me to make sure that I am not led somewhere where I shouldn't be led. A reminder to all of you to be careful out there. In the woods, there are so many things that we do not understand. Unexplainable things happen all the time. I know that. I'm not naive. But I like hearing other people's opinions. You never realize the magnitude of those moments until you're in them, though. I worked search and rescue, thought I'd seen it all. Then I saw the beat. I wasn't working at the time. I was scaling a peak on my own. I would regularly hike and climb to keep myself in shape. I remember the air getting cold and crisp as the sun started to set. The cold fed into my adrenaline somehow, and I was determined to reach the top by dark. The scent of the earth and pine were the only companions I needed to motivate myself to keep pushing further. This was a peak that I'd had my eye on for a while. I wasn't going to turn back before reaching my goal. The howl was my first warning. It sounded far off and strangely muffled. It didn't strike me as a wolf or a coyote, but I couldn't imagine what other sort of animal would make that sound. I stared in the direction that the call had come from. I watched some birds scatter from the trees in the distance. When the forest got quiet again, I moved on. I was still an hour from my ultimate destination. I had all the gear I needed in my pack to set up camp. I'd return from my journey the next morning. With darkness closing in fast, I doubled my pace. Maybe that sense of urgency is the reason I blocked out the ominous nature of the animal's howl. Maybe I was just careless. Either way, I wasn't complaining when my luck turned up. A few trees had been overturned at the summit. It created the perfect clearing. There were no signs that I could recognize of the area being occupied by a bear or a pack of wolves. I set up camp quickly. I'd have a good view of the stars overhead and an even better view of the sunrise in the morning. Night came and went in painstaking beauty. The ugly thing woke me up an hour before the sun broke the horizon. It started with a loud knocking. I was shaken from my sleep so abruptly that for a moment, I thought I was back at home. I thought someone was banging on the door to my apartment. When I sat upright and opened my eyes only to see the darkness of the tent around me, I realized something was wrong. I called out. Animals in that area didn't knock in that way. No one answered. I had a compact shovel close by. I grabbed it and made my way out of the tent. I knew facing down a predator was out of the question. I just needed to know what I was dealing with. The shovel gave me enough of a false sense of confidence to head outside. "Who's there?" I called again. The knocking had stopped. I knew from experience that hikers could be a mischievous bunch. I'd rescued a few that had gotten in over their heads, trying to prank a friend or a brother. A rustling brought my attention to the edge of the camp. The moment my eyes adjusted to the depth and the darkness, I saw it. I thought it was a man at first. He would have been 7 feet tall, but I didn't know how else to rationalize what I was looking at. The beast was standing on 2 legs. Its eyes caught the faint moonlight. I could distinguish a pair of pronounced canine teeth behind the lips that were curled up into a strange snarl. It was covered from head to toe in hair, thick, almost woolly but dark-colored. I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. Whatever courage the shovel had given me, it dropped to the bottom of my stomach. I'd just climbed a mountain, but I'd never felt so small. Like I said, you can't perceive the magnitude until you're in the moment. If I'd felt any heavier, I would have sunk into the earth. Then the beast ran toward me. It sprinted at me with the intensity of an Olympian with a gold medal in reach. I don't know how I found the strength, but I turned to run. I thought for sure that death was right behind me. I'd be the unspecified remains discovered after a supposed bear attack. To my surprise, the beast didn't follow. He ran into the camp, and I heard him destroy it. I heard the tent upended and my pack torn open. I heard my belongings spill across the ground in a loud clamor. At the time, I thought all of those sounds spelled doom for me. But as I got further and further away, the sounds got quieter. I was midway down the mountain before I stopped to catch my breath, before I looked up at the sun and accepted that I was alive. I wasn't free just yet. I still had to get back to my car. But I was alive. I called a few friends the moment that I could. They were veteran climbers, also members of search and rescue. A few of them laughed. Others told me to keep the story to myself. I did, not wanting to tarnish my reputation, but I still climbed back to that campsite the following month. I recovered what wasn't destroyed or discarded. I thought that maybe I had proof. There weren't any signs of a bear attack, no claw marks or prints or indentations of a bite on my pack. There were footprints, though. Those I tried to share. I tried to send them to the friends who had doubted me, who had tried to keep me quiet. They strongly recommended that I delete the photos, and they warned me not to return to that summit. I can't imagine why. Unless they think that the most dangerous part of that night wasn't the encounter at all. Maybe they know something about that mountain that I don't. Even though I have had several encounters with some really strange things in my life that I can't really put into words, I have never been afraid of them. But one day, in the fall of 2015, I had an encounter that was a little different from those others, mainly because of how the thing I encountered acted towards me. At the time, I lived in a house on the outskirts of Saugus, California. I had left my parents' home and rented this place with 2 other roommates, one whose name was Roxy. It was about 1 a.m, and Roxy and I were driving home after going to see some friends play at a music festival near LA. I was driving because Roxy's car was in the shop, and anyway, she always liked when I drove. We were blasting music while we drove when suddenly Roxy said, "Hey, what's that?" At first I didn't know what she meant, but I saw her looking back. So I glanced in the rearview mirror, and then I saw it too. Something moving behind us along the side of the highway, darting in and out next to the guardrail. It looked like a big dog, or maybe even a coyote, but why that didn't make sense was that it was walking on 2 legs, and it was fast. It was keeping pace with us, even though it was staying about 50 yards behind. I slowed down a bit so we could get a better look and see what was exactly going on. And that's when I heard Roxy yell, "It's coming at us!" Sure enough, the thing started running even more quickly right towards our car now that we were slowing down. And the image that really sticks in my mind about this part was that it looked like it was grinning, or maybe it was smirking in a way it knew it had the upper hand. I'm not sure why it was making that expression, but either way, the way its mouth looked was insane. And just as we were trying to get a good look at it, it passed under one of the big lights along the side of the road, and I could see that this thing was not a normal animal at all. I could now even see horns that I hadn't been able to make out when it was further back. I know that sounds crazy, but they looked like goat horns. The creature was about 6 feet tall, though, with dark brown fur all over its body, except for the white parts of skin showing in some spots, like around the eyes. Another confusing part was that I could now see that it was actually running on its toes, and when I say that, I mean it looked like it was running with its feet pointed down, or maybe like it had hooves or something. All I could think was that this thing had come straight from the devil. Later, Roxy said she had the same thought, which makes me think we were correct about that, even though I don't know how we both had the same random thought at the same time. One thing is for sure, though. It scared the heck out of both of us, especially when it started to make strange sounds. At first I thought it was growling, but then I realized that the sounds were not growls, but had some sort of regulated cadence. I honestly then thought that this creature was speaking to me in some unknown language. At least, unknown to me. Roxy said she could hear it too, but all she heard were buzzing sounds, and couldn't decide if it was actually a language or not. But whatever this thing did with its voice made my car shake and made it difficult for me to stay in control. It was at that point that I floored it and sped off as fast as I could back to our house. Once we got home, Roxy ran inside to use the bathroom and barfed everywhere because she felt so sick from what happened. But for whatever reason, I now wasn't scared. I was actually excited. Roxy thought I was crazy and made that very clear as we told our other roommate all about what happened. But as we told her, she became super worried that something might have followed us home, and she couldn't stop thinking that it might be lurking around our house. I thought that idea was crazy, but she seemed scared enough that we all went outside to check. We went with flashlights and looked all over the place. I even kept my mace in my hand just in case, but didn't see anything unusual. However, we did hear strange noises coming from the hillside across the street from us. It sounded like a cross between a dog barking and this weird moaning sound. The whole thing freaked us out, so we all went back inside and locked up tight for the night. A few days later, Roxy got her car back from the shop and started driving herself places again. She then told me that while she was driving home one night from work, she saw that same creature standing on top of a hill near where we had seen it before. She said it was just standing there looking at her, and she had to drive past it and hold it together, hoping the whole time that it didn't react to her or recognize her. Obviously, I don't know why that thing was there, but I'm glad Roxy got through it okay. And as for me, I haven't seen that devil creature again since that night, but I do feel the presence of some really strange energies in the areas around our house. I'm convinced that I am sensing that creature's presence. I'm sort of like that anyway. Sensitive to energies and such, and not really afraid, just curious. I look forward to reading the comments to see if anyone else ever had a similar experience.